There is someone in your life right now wearing two faces. One face smiles at you in public. The other one is quietly working against you the second you walk out of the room. They take notes on your weaknesses. They test how far they can push before you push back. And every time you let it slide, every time you choose peace over confrontation, they walk away more confident, more dangerous, more convinced that you will never do anything about it. But here's what they didn't account for. You found this video, and that isn't a coincidence. Something inside you reached a breaking point, not the explosive kind, but the quiet kind. The kind that doesn't scream, the kind that simply decides, you're not here to vent, you're not here to feel validated. You're here because the version of you that kept absorbing the hits, that stayed silent when you should have been strategic, that handed people the keys to your mind without thinking twice, that version is done. What I'm about to hand you are 10 psychological weapons taken from the coldest, most calculated thinkers in human history. Machiavelli didn't pen his work for the sensitive. He wrote it for those who were finally ready to see the world without the blindfold on. This is not a revenge guide. This is a reconstruction manual. When you finish this, you won't react the same way. You won't carry yourself the same way. You will respond to manipulation with such precise, unshakable calm that the people who targeted you will genuinely not know what hit them. Settle in. Focus up. It's time. Principle 1. Seal yourself shut. Everything that follows in this video rests on this one foundation. If you absorb nothing else, absorb this. Stop being readable. Right now, the people who move against you hold one critical advantage over you, and it has nothing to do with intelligence or resources. It has to do with access. They have access to your reactions. They can see when something lands. They notice when your tone shifts, when your composure slips, when your body gives away what your mouth is trying to hide. And every single reaction you leak freely, that is intelligence they are collecting on you. That is ammunition you are loading into a gun pointed at yourself. Machiavelli understood this deeply. The one who can be easily read can be easily guided. Your emotional state is data. The second you broadcast it without control, you become a system someone else can operate. So here is where the work begins. You stop performing your emotions for people who haven't earned the right to witness them. You become deliberately sealed, not cold, not robotic, but guarded in the way that truly powerful people are guarded. Composed because composure is a choice. Controlled because control is freedom. When someone fires an insult in your direction, your face does not shift. When someone pokes at you trying to get a rise, your energy stays exactly where it was. When someone attempts to bait you into reacting in public, you look at them the way someone looks at a fly near their food. Noticed, irrelevant, not worth the energy. Start practicing this in the small moments. Someone hijacks your words in a meeting, you pause. You don't bite back. Someone disrespects you in a group setting. You hold your gaze steady and say absolutely nothing. Watch what happens. Watch how quickly the room shifts. Watch how the person who is testing you suddenly becomes unsure of themselves. People fear what they cannot decode. The moment you become emotionally sealed, you become strategically untouchable. Nobody can dismantle a person who gives them nothing to grab onto. Principle 2. Give them enough rope. The moment most people sense someone working against them, they make a move that costs them everything. They react immediately. They confront before the full picture is visible. They lay out everything they know before they've gathered everything they need. And just like that, they lose the most powerful resource available to them: time. Machiavelli observed that the sharp mind watches first and acts second, because when someone acts, especially when they act out of impulse, they expose who they really are. Their desperation surfaces. Their methods become visible. Their entire architecture of scheming begins showing its cracks. This is principle 2, and it demands something that goes against every instinct you have. Do not stop them. Not yet. When you become aware that someone is positioning themselves against you, resist the urgency to shut it down. Let them continue. Let them feel safe in their strategy. Let them operate with the full belief that you're somewhere in the dark, completely unaware of what's building. Because here is what comfortable schemers always do. They get loose. They start talking when they should stay silent. They start making larger moves because they've convinced themselves that you're not watching. They reach further, expose more, involve more people, until the entire operation is spread out in front of you like a document you didn't even have to ask for. This is not passivity. This is a predator's patience. Think about a grandmaster at a chess table. The novice attacks in the opening moves, burns his energy early, and reveals his intentions immediately. The master builds quietly for 30 moves, setting a trap so deep the opponent walks into it thinking they're winning, right up until the moment they aren't. That energy is yours to carry now. You don't rush, you don't panic, you observe, you gather, you let them make every mistake on their own. And when they've finally shown you everything, every angle, every ally, every move in their playbook, that's when you act. Once, decisively, with an accuracy they never prepared for because they never thought you were paying attention. Patience doesn't look like weakness. Patience is the sharpest disguise a predator can wear. Principle 3. Reflect them, then disappear. This is psychological strategy at its most elegant. When it's executed correctly, the other person doesn't just feel confused. They start questioning their own grip on reality. Here's how it works. When someone comes at you dirty, you don't resist them. You don't argue. You reflect them back to themselves with complete precision. They show up warm. You return warmth. They pull back. You pull back equally. They invest energy in you. You invest it right back. You become a mirror. And gradually, without realizing it's happening, they start to feel genuinely understood by you. They feel a bond forming. They become convinced they have some kind of leverage over your emotions. That comfort is the setup. Because the actual weapon isn't the reflection. The weapon is what happens when the reflection disappears. Once they've settled into the rhythm you've created, once they've begun to expect and even depend on your presence in ways they'd never openly admit, you remove it. No argument, no explanation, no dramatic final conversation. You simply step back, you become someone who is suddenly just unavailable. And here is where their mind begins working against them. Machiavelli recognized that human beings don't truly value what they hold in their hands. They become obsessed with what slips through their fingers. The moment your energy is no longer there for someone who grew accustomed to receiving it, you create a void that no reasoning can fill. They start going back through every interaction looking for the moment things changed. They start reaching out. They start chasing something they never properly valued, because your absence speaks louder than any argument ever could. You never once raised your voice. There was no confrontation, no spectacle. You simply withdrew. And that withdrawal rewired everything. Principle 4. Build your own battlefield. Every single conversation, every confrontation, every exchange you have with another person exists inside an invisible structure. That structure is called a frame. It determines who holds the narrative, who is defending, and who is leading. Most people move through their entire lives without ever recognizing this. They enter difficult conversations completely unaware that the terms of engagement were already set, and set by someone else. That's why they keep losing. When someone targets you with dirty tactics, their very first move is always the same. They construct a frame that serves them. They position you as the threat. They position themselves as the one being wronged. They shape the story so carefully that no matter what you say in response, you end up sounding cornered, guilty, or desperate. The moment you accept that framing, the moment you begin defending yourself inside their narrative, the battle is already lost. Machiavelli was precise about this. Power doesn't belong to the physically strongest. It belongs to whoever defines the conditions of the fight. So here is how you handle it. You stop arguing inside structures other people built for you. You tear down their frame and rebuild on your terms, calmly, deliberately, without a trace of agitation. They call you selfish. You don't explain yourself. You ask them quietly why they decided your energy was owed to them. They tell you that you've changed. You don't apologize. You let them know that sometimes becoming more means becoming unrecognizable to people who preferred keeping you smaller. Notice what's happening. You are not defending, you're not reacting. You are redirecting the entire current of the conversation into territory they weren't prepared for. You're taking the pressure they launched at you and returning it with compounding force. The person who controls the frame controls the emotional direction of everything that follows. Stop entering cages other people constructed. Build your own space, stand inside it, and let the world come to meet you there. The one who names the game never loses it.
Principle 5. Let silence do the damage.
There is a tool available to you that most people are too uncomfortable to use because it looks, on the surface, like surrender. But in the hands of someone who genuinely understands power dynamics, it becomes the single most devastating instrument in the entire arsenal. That tool is intentional silence. When someone comes at you with dirty tactics, they are operating on a script. That script requires your participation. They want you to argue back, to justify yourself, to get loud, to show emotion. Because the moment you do, they have footage. They can point at your reaction and say, look at this person, look how unhinged, look how defensive. Every single word you send back to them is material they can build a case with. But silence, real, grounded, deliberate silence, starves the entire operation. Machiavelli wrote that the man who speaks without filter reveals every fear he carries, while the man who speaks nothing reveals only his power. When someone attacks you with language and your entire response is stillness, the room shifts. The attacker begins to look frantic. Their words start bouncing back at them. Anyone watching starts noticing the contrast, the loudness of one person against the absolute composure of the other. You become the mountain. They become the wind throwing itself against something that has no interest in moving. But understand this clearly. This is not about going quiet because you have no response. This is about choosing silence the way a marksman selects the moment to pull the trigger, with complete intention and zero wasted energy. You are not speaking because you already know that every word you offer will be twisted, extracted, and weaponized by people who decided you were the enemy long before the conversation started. So you offer nothing. You let them accelerate into thin air. You sit in your stillness and communicate exactly one thing. I see exactly what you're doing, and I have already decided it's beneath me. That silence follows them when they leave. It finds them at night. It does more lasting damage than any confrontation, any argument, any perfectly constructed response ever could, because it leaves them with no resolution, and unresolved things consume people from the inside.
Principle 6. Guard your interior. Study everyone else.
The vast majority of people aren't defeated by outside forces. They defeat themselves, and they do it with their mouths. They share their plans before the ink is dry. They hand out personal information to people who collect it like evidence. They confide their vulnerabilities to people who file every word away and wait for the right moment to deploy it. And then, when those people eventually use every disclosed detail against them, they act shocked. Machiavelli put it plainly, what you surrender freely today becomes the weapon that finds you tomorrow. This is not about living in fear of everyone around you. This is about maintaining operational discipline. Principle 6 is this: give away nothing, absorb everything. From this point forward, you move through every room like someone who is simultaneously invisible and fully observant. You watch how people carry themselves before they think anyone's paying attention. You listen to what people choose to skip over, not just what they choose to say. You notice who speaks about others carelessly, because those same people will speak about you with equal carelessness the moment you step out. You track patterns, you catalog inconsistencies. You remember small details that people assume vanished the moment they were spoken. And while you're absorbing all of this, you are releasing nothing. When someone presses you with personal questions, you respond with warmth that communicates nothing of value. When someone pushes for your plans, your finances, your relationships, your next move, you redirect with a smile and something that puts the spotlight back on them. People love talking about themselves, Every time they do, you're quietly filing information you may never need, but will have if the day ever comes. Information is not just knowledge. Information is positioning. The person who knows the most while revealing the least holds quiet dominance over every room they walk into, without ever raising a hand or raising their voice. While others are performing, you are cataloging. While others are reacting, you are recording. And by the time someone decides to move against you, you will have already mapped out their strategy, because you began studying them long before they ever thought to look at you.
Principle 7. Rise until your absence hurts them.
There is a category of power that lives completely outside of aggression. It doesn't require confrontation. It doesn't involve schemes or mind games. It is built slowly, silently, and it becomes more dangerous with every passing week. It is the power of being someone people genuinely cannot afford to lose. Machiavelli drew a distinction. The ruler who is feared has safety, but the ruler who becomes indispensable becomes untouchable. Most people who've been betrayed reach for revenge like it's the logical response. They want to expose the person, damage them, make them feel the weight of what they caused. And that instinct is understandable, but revenge is a low-ceiling game. It keeps you at eye level with the person who wronged you. It ties your energy to theirs, and it produces nothing that lasts. The real response to someone who played dirty with you is not to tear them down. It is to build yourself so high that what they did looks, in retrospect, like the worst decision they ever made. So you go quiet, but not idle. You get your body sharper. You develop skills you've been putting off. You expand your income streams. You deepen your relationships with people worth knowing. You fill your mind with things that compound over time. You say nothing about any of it publicly. You don't announce your progress. You don't post it as a message directed at anyone. You simply build and let the results announce themselves in ways that can't be faked or argued with. Because here is what happens when you rise. The people who underestimated you start watching from a distance with something heavy sitting in their chest. They start sending messages framed as catching up. They start looking for ways back into your orbit, because the person they dismissed has quietly become someone they now recognize as significant. And at that point, you hold the card that revenge never could have given you. Not anger, not exposure, choice. The choice of whether they deserve access to who you've become, and more often than not, they don't. Your growth isn't a message aimed at them, it's a monument to yourself. But monuments cast long shadows, and those shadows have a way of falling exactly where they need to.
Principle 8. Shatter the pattern they've built of you.
There is one kind of person that no schemer, no manipulator, no dirty player in the world has a reliable counter for. The person they cannot predict. Think about this. Every single move someone makes against you is built on one core assumption, that they know how you'll respond. They disrespect you because they've learned you'll absorb it quietly. They ignore you because they've watched you chase. They circulate lies about you because they expect you to scramble publicly trying to correct the record. Every tactic in their playbook is calibrated to a version of you they believe they've figured out. So what happens when that version no longer exists? What happens when you become someone they cannot calculate? Someone who doesn't fit the model they built of you? Someone whose next move they genuinely cannot forecast? Machiavelli wrote that the person who adjusts their methods to match shifting circumstances will thrive, while the person locked into rigid patterns will eventually be destroyed by them.
Principle 8. Shatter the pattern they've built of you.
You stop behaving in the ways people have come to expect from you. When they wait for anger, you respond with something so calm it unsettles the entire room. When they expect you to chase, you become someone with somewhere better to be. When they're braced for you to go quiet, you speak, and what you say cuts straight through whatever narrative they were building. Understand the distinction here. This is not chaos. Chaotic people are out of control. Unpredictable people are in complete control. They simply refuse to make their pattern legible to anyone watching. And what does this do to the people who've been working against you? It freezes them. They can no longer plan ahead because they no longer have a reliable map of who you are. They hesitate. They second guess. They start making errors because the mental model they depended on has completely broken down. And while they stand there trying to rebuild it, you are already 10 moves ahead, operating in a dimension they can't even see yet. Predictability is not consistency, it is a cage. The moment you break the pattern, you break their control over you. Permanently, Parental 9.
Principle 9. Build an army they never see coming.
No great force in history was assembled by a single person operating in complete isolation, and no one who plays dirty has ever been truly neutralized by someone who refused to build a circle. This is the mistake people make when they find themselves in conflict with someone underhanded. They go solo. They keep their pain locked up. They treat their strategy like a secret they can't share with anyone. And while there is dignity in that, there is also a fatal vulnerability. Because isolated people can be picked off quietly while the rest of the world remains unaware. Machiavelli was blunt about it. The leader without allies has no throne to stand on. Principle 9 is about cultivating alliances so quietly that by the time your opponent realizes you have them, it's already too late for them to respond. But this requires important clarification. This is not about finding people to complain to, going around describing how you've been wronged, seeking sympathy, rallying people through pity. That is not an alliance. That is a support group. And support groups do not shift power dynamics. What you do instead is identify people who operate with genuine integrity, who carry real ambition, who hold standards similar to yours, and you build something real with them, based on mutual contribution, based on mutual respect. You bring something to their life, they bring something to yours. No manufactured closeness, no transactions dressed up as loyalty. You become someone worth standing beside, and the right people will recognize that without being asked. And here is the devastation this creates for the person working against you. They assumed you were alone. They built their strategy around that assumption. They calculated that no one would challenge their version of the story. But when they look up and find that your character has quietly earned you the trust of the people surrounding them, their mutual connections, their colleagues, the shared circles they assumed were neutral, their entire approach collapses inward. You never said a single negative word about them. You didn't have to. Their behavior narrated itself while your alliances formed the walls around it. The most powerful person in the room is rarely the loudest one. They are the one with 5 quiet, solid people behind them that nobody thought to count.
Principle 10. Leave like you are always going to leave.
Every principle in this video has been about strategy, about positioning, about operating with a clarity and discipline that most people never develop. But this last one, this is the one that separates people who are powerful from people who are truly untouchable. It is the one move that no manipulator alive has ever figured out a response to. Walking away as though you never needed them at all. Most people cannot do this. They stay long past the point where they should have left, not because the situation is good for them, but because they've become attached to the outcome. They want the argument resolved on their terms. They want the other person to finally acknowledge what they did. They want some form of recognition, some admission, some closure that confirms they were right. And that need, that hunger for acknowledgement from people who have already shown you who they are, is the chain that keeps you connected to something that should have been behind you months ago. Machiavelli understood that the person with no attachments to unnecessary outcomes is beyond anyone's reach, because you can only control someone through something they're unwilling to release. So here is the final lesson. When you exit someone who played dirty with you, there is no speech. There is no lengthy message laying out your grievances and your worth. There is no dramatic moment designed to make them feel your absence before you've even left. You simply become someone who is no longer there, with the same quiet certainty a person of real authority carries when they step past something that no longer holds relevance. And here is what makes it so quietly devastating. When you leave without bitterness, without performance, without even a trace of unresolved emotion, every bit of the power in that relationship leaves with you. They are left with a conversation that has no other voice in it, with questions they cannot resolve, with guilt that has no place to go. with a silence that finds them in every quiet moment for months afterward. You didn't fight. You didn't beg. You didn't try to make them understand. You simply left. And that will stay with them longer than anything else you could have possibly done, because your absence says everything that words could never fully carry. It says they weren't important enough to fight for. It says your peace outweighs their presence. It says the version of you they tried to diminish has already moved forward and built something they will never have access to. That is not cruelty. That is not bitterness. That is power in its most refined form. If something in this video landed somewhere deep, if one of these 10 principles made you see something about yourself or your situation that you hadn't been willing to look at before, drop a comment right now. Write this: I was the target. Now I'm the architect. Let that be your declaration. Let that be the moment you stopped reacting and started designing. If this brought you value, hit that like button, subscribe and turn on notifications, because every video on this channel is built to sharpen how you think and change how you move through the world. The world has always played rough. Now you know exactly how to respond.